Welcome to a cinematic exploration of one of the largest empires the world has ever known, the British Empire. For centuries, Britain ascended to unprecedented global dominance. Its reach was staggering. By the early 20th century, the British Empire covered almost a quarter of the Earth's land surface and ruled over a fifth of the world's population. It was truly the empire on which the sun never sets, a testament to its unparalleled territorial expanse. This dominance was built on a foundation of massive global trade networks, overwhelming military power, and the extraction of wealth and resources from its colonies. Yet the forces that brought Britain to its peak also sowed the first seeds of its destruction, two catastrophic world wars. World War I, though victorious, left Britain economically gutted. The cost of war and colonial administration created immense debt and structural strain. World War II was the final, crippling blow. Massive human and physical destruction shattered the pretense of unshakable imperial power. Britain emerged from the war heavily indebted, its manufacturing base compromised, and its treasury severely depleted. The empire that once ruled the world now found itself relying on its former colony, the United States, for financial stability and aid. As Britain weakened, the facade of invincible imperial control began to crumble, giving strength to forces long suppressed. Across Asia and Africa, nationalist and independence movements gained critical momentum, viewing the weakened imperial power as an opportunity. The demand for self-rule was no longer a fringe movement. It was a mass political force that could no longer be ignored. Nowhere was this struggle more profound than in India, the so-called jewel in the crown of the British Empire. India was strategically and economically vital. Its loss would be catastrophic, and everyone knew it. Led by iconic figures like Mahatma Gandhi, mass protests and civil disobedience made British rule increasingly ungovernable. The economic stress at home, combined with unrelenting pressure abroad, made the financial and moral cost of holding on to India untenable. The moment of truth arrived in 1947. On August 15, 1947, India gained its independence, marking a seismic shift in global power. This single, powerful moment signaled the irreversible decline of the British Empire, setting a precedent that other colonies would soon follow. The age of empire was ending, and the era of decolonization had just begun. Join us in Part 2 as we explore the rapid unraveling of the British Empire. Welcome to Part 2, Decolonization and the Decline of British Power. The second half of the 20th century saw the rapid unraveling of the largest empire the world had ever known. India's independence in 1947 was not an isolated event. It was the tipping point that initiated a chain reaction across the globe, dramatically accelerating the end of the British Empire. The partition of India and Pakistan proved that, after two world wars, Britain could no longer sustain its imperial structure against organized popular demand. With the jewel in the crown gone, the map of the British Empire began to shrink dramatically. Countries across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East followed India's lead in a sudden burst of independence movements. The primary force behind this collapse was the irresistible spread of anti-colonial nationalism, which had taken firm root during the interwar years and the Second World War. Leaders in territories like Ghana, Nigeria, and Malaya mobilized mass support, uniting diverse peoples under the common goal of self-rule and freedom from external dominance. Resistance was met with force, leading to protracted conflicts and civil disobedience that stretched the resources and political will of the British government to breaking point. Maintaining the empire, policing rebellious colonies, and fighting insurgents was becoming prohibitively expensive, both financially and in terms of human lives, costs a post-war, debt-laden Britain could ill afford. This internal colonial crisis was amplified by powerful external pressures that forced Britain to face the fact that the world order had fundamentally changed. The new global superpower, the United States, viewed traditional European empires as relics of the past. Washington actively pressured Britain to dismantle its colonies, prioritizing free trade and stability over colonial control. The formation of the United Nations established the principle of self-determination, giving former colonies a global platform to demand their independence and placing the moral weight of the world against the continued existence of the British Empire. Furthermore, the escalating Cold War forced Britain to prioritize aligning with the United States against the Soviet Union. Old imperial projects became distractions from the new global conflict. All these pressures, internal resistance, mounting costs, and hostile global forces, converged in 1956 with the pivotal moment known as the Suez Crisis. Egyptian nationalist leader Gamal Abdel Nasser's decision to nationalize the vital British-controlled Suez Canal was seen as an unacceptable challenge to Britain's remaining global influence. In a desperate attempt to reassert imperial power, Britain, France, and Israel secretly conspired to invade Egypt. The invasion was immediately met with furious international condemnation. The United States and the Soviet Union, for once in agreement, used massive political and financial pressure to halt the operation. Britain was humiliated, forced into a disastrous and immediate withdrawal. This event exposed a stark truth. Britain could no longer act independently on the world stage without the consent of the United States. Suez was the psychological marker, the moment Britain recognized that its era as a global superpower was definitively over. The final phase of decolonization now moved forward quickly and almost inevitably. The empire that had been built over centuries disintegrated in decades, brought down by the power of nationalism, the crushing cost of maintaining control, and the overwhelming pressure of a new bipolar world. By 1956, the map was nearly wiped clean. The era of the British Empire was officially drawing to a close, paving the way for the modern independent nations we know today. Welcome to the final chapter of our series, where we examine the swift and dramatic conclusion of the British Empire and its enduring legacy on the modern world. Our story begins at a pivotal moment, the Suez Crisis of 1956. This event served as a humiliating confirmation that Britain was no longer a world power capable of acting independently on the global stage. Having been weakened by 2 world wars and eclipsed by the new superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, the stage was set for the rapid dismantling of the imperial structure. The Suez debacle forced Britain to accept its new reality. It marked the moment London ceded its global military and political authority to Washington and a newly bipolar world order. Focus now shifted to Africa, where pressure for self-rule became an irresistible force throughout the 1950s and 60s. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan famously spoke of the, quote, wind of change blowing through the continent. A wave of rapid independence saw nations like Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya gain their freedom. From the 1950s through the 1970s, the vast formal structure of the empire was almost completely dismantled, piece by piece, across Asia, the Caribbean, and particularly in Africa. For Britain itself, the loss of empire necessitated a fundamental shift in national identity. The nation had to shift its focus from being an imperial ruler to a modern European power, turning inward to address domestic issues and cultural change. Economically and politically, Britain sought new footing, eventually joining the European Economic Community, trying to find its place in a globalized, post-colonial world. Yet, the empire did not vanish entirely. It transformed into a unique organization, the Commonwealth of Nations. This evolution saw the former colonies become equal members of a voluntary association focused on shared goals, cooperation, and common values. Today, the Commonwealth remains a significant force, promoting democracy, development, and trade among nations that share institutional and linguistic heritage from the British Empire. But the legacy is complex. Even today, the echoes of empire persist, shaping global politics and the lives of billions. Former colonies continue to grapple with borders drawn by imperial powers, institutional structures inherited from Britain, and the complex challenge of post-colonial development. From language and sport to parliamentary democracy and international law, the empire's influence is woven deeply into the fabric of the globalized world. As we conclude our series, we must step back and reflect on the end of this epochal institution. Given the rise of nationalism, the devastation of the world wars, and the moral tide against colonialism, was the collapse of the largest empire in history simply inevitable? Or did the empire truly end, or did it merely evolve, exchanging formal control for economic, political, and cultural influence through the Commonwealth and other lasting ties? The legacy of the British Empire is not merely history. It is the ground upon which the modern world stands, a complex, contradictory, and enduring presence. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. If you found this series insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more updates and in-depth historical analysis.